Rule number 10, Section 2A states a player shall not run with the ball without dribbling it. That's the rule. But what about our politics? Are there any rules anymore? And if so, will anybody play by them? These days, politics could use a little refereeing, and we're not afraid to blow the whistle.
The U.S. in the last 2 days has been conducting the first airstrikes in Yemen since the death last month of Ryan Owens. Using drones and Apache helicopters, the U.S. hit al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula targets with more than 20 strikes that we know of, an aggressive new wave against the terror group that was previewed by the president in his address to Congress Tuesday night. Joining me now is David Cohen, former deputy director of the CIA and MSNBC national security contributor. David, good to see you.
Good to see you.
The initial strike that went awry, and the White House and the president claiming it was highly successful, John McCain, Senator Reid saying otherwise, our own reporting saying we don't yet know how much intelligence, and that certainly you can't call a raid with so many civilian casualties, the loss of an American Navy SEAL, the loss of the Osprey, you can't call that a success. Maybe however one qualifies it. But how big a problem was it with the government there, and how disruptive was that?
Yeah, well, it was disruptive with the Yemeni government, and initially, right after the raid, they put out word that they were no longer going to cooperate with the United States in going after AQAP, which is a very dangerous terrorist organization that still has designs on the United States and elsewhere. And so, not having the cooperation of the Yemeni government would significantly impede our ability to go after AQAP. I think ultimately the Yemeni government reversed, but that was a real problem.
The way the raid was approved has raised a lot of eyebrows. Right. A dinner meeting with, yes, General Mattis and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dunford, but also Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner, the president, having dinner. They're not in the Situation Room. They're doing it in 25 minutes or 30 minutes or at the most 45 minutes by some reports, not in the Situation Room, spending hours drilling down on the risks, the benefits. Describe what the process ought to be like.
Right. So there are a couple of problems, I think, with the way this raid was approved. So first of all, that dinner itself with Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner, and not the State Department, not the intelligence community, not the CIA, talking with the president about the potential raid and the ramifications and how it ought to be structured. That itself is far different from the way a final decision would have been made in the Obama administration. But even before that, there was no process to speak of. And the way that this typically happens, at least the way it happened in the Obama administration, is a raid like this would come up through the process and at a minimum would be presented to, debated, discussed, and refined at the Deputies Committee, the sub-cabinet level meeting in the Situation Room, with the Deputy National Security Advisor presiding, and you'd have obviously the Defense Department there, you'd have the Intelligence Community, you'd have the State Department, you'd have the Justice Department, you'd have others who had something to offer in thinking through this particular raid. That, so far as has been reported, as far as I know, never occurred. And so, it's impossible to say it would have turned out differently, but there's a reason that sort of rigorous process is put in place. It's to maximize the chance that you have a successful operation.
Well, and in fact, according to some details that were in the Washington Post this week, there was a tribal leader. We first reported that he was the target or one of the targets, and he has perhaps dual loyalties. So that is the kind of information that analysts from the agency, from the CIA, might have been able to provide. And the people of that village then rose up and took arms against the Americans and the Emiratis who were attacking, right, because of tribal loyalties, not because they were necessarily anti-American, and that's where we suffered the casualties.
Right. I mean, it's a very complicated part of the world, and as I say, AQAP, terrorist organization, is embedded in Yemen in various places, but there's also very strong tribal loyalties. That's why is to help understand what you're getting yourself into.
One more question which has been raised. We are hearing from the Trump White House and Trump White House officials. They inherited this. This was handed to them. It was launched days after they took office. You're a witness to this. Was this a green-lighted, finished mission when it was turned over to the Trump people?
The short answer is that's not true. This particular raid, this concept of operations that they presented apparently to the president in that dinner meeting was not approved in the Obama administration. I was there. I was in all those meetings. This was never approved.
Thank you so much, David Cohen. A very not only a complicated part of the world, but a really complicated issue for this new administration.